I think we can all agree that yesterday's game against the Anaheim Ducks probably could have gone a little bit better. Find out why on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, like I said, we are talking about yesterday's game against the Ducks. Wasn't exactly the resounding victory that I was hoping for. Jets got off to a good start, and then everything just sort of fell apart. Winnipeg had a 2-0 lead and ended up losing 4-3, which is just kind of annoying. Yes, Winnipeg did get an overtime point, so there's that, but I just feel like this was one of those games where Winnipeg was generally good, but, Hellebuyck being slightly off and the team just not quite being at the races in some capacity. I don't quite know what it was. It was really hard to put your finger on it, but something was just very slightly off. It's just one of those games where you sort of go, maybe a bounce or two doesn't go the right way. Maybe you just have one of those weird nights where things look okay under the hood, but, there's maybe one or two moments that really stand out. And I think that's probably, what happened to the Jets. But before we dive into that, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return because new customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, like I said, yesterday's game was kind of, mediocre, I would say. The Jets weren't bad, and I think that that's probably worth pointing out. Winnipeg generally controlled 5v5 play, and aside from maybe some so-so power plays and a couple of defensive miscues, there really wasn't much to be upset about. The top line got the stuff rolling pretty early with a great tic-tac-toe goal between Velarde, Scheifele, and Connor. Connor's back pass especially was quite pretty, but just a really well-worked Globetrotters goal. And then, later in the period, we had a spring step with, Lowry getting a nice feed from Iafallo, and Iafallo's fingerprints were actually quite heavy in this game. He is subbing in for Appleton while Mason is out for some unknown amount of time. And Iafallo alongside Lowry has been looking pretty good. That line has needed a spark. And Iafallo actually had not only an assist in this game, but also a goal, and probably could have had one other point somewhere. I think he almost had a pretty good assist. But, just generally looks like the spark that line has probably needed. Because, Niederreiter's been a little bit quiet. I wouldn't say Lowry has necessarily been quiet, but, that group isn't really scoring a lot these days, which kind of hurts because the rest of the team, unfortunately, whether it's a good thing or not, kind of relies on this trio to produce offensively with some depth support. So, this game was kind of okay in a lot of respects, but I feel like Helly maybe would have liked one or two goals back. And, the Stanley Pionk pairing was probably one of the few really big issues on the evening. That duo really struggled with defensive zone reads. And it's funny because if you look at their expected goal share, they generally won out. But if you actually look at some of the underlying, Corsi numbers and stuff, and you can also just sort of tell when, Anaheim had specific counters where they were able to pin the Jets back, it was usually that defensive pairing that was on the ice. Not necessarily either Stanley or Pionk were specifically to blame for everything that happened, but there were a couple of moments where maybe Stanley wanted to clear the puck out, wasn't able to do so. Pionk's not really in, view to support. And I think late in the game, Anaheim's tying goal probably came as a result of Stanley failing to get a clear from below the goal line. So, it is what it is. The Jets defense right now is constantly changing, thanks to the injury situation. at some point, Winnipeg is just going to have to admit Stanley probably can't do the job that they're asking him to do, but they don't seem that ready to admit that. So, in the meantime, Winnipeg is going to have to figure out something because right now the Jets' blue line is probably one of the few really big issues with the team. While the forwards are also going through a couple of things. Nemesnikov probably had one of his worst games, and he actually got demoted to the third line, and they swapped him and Lowry because Vlad, the puck getting to him just instantly kills the offense in the OZ. It's hard to watch. It kind of reminds me a little bit of when Blake Wheeler used to struggle with this stuff. You all remember Wheeler in his older age, towards the end of his Jets career. Every time the puck landed on his stick, it was like handling a hand grenade. So, Vlad's kind of going through something similar. I do wonder if he's been nursing an injury. He's taken a lot of hits this year, a lot. And maybe that's having some sort of an impact. But maybe age is also just catching up. He's 31, 32 now. So Vlad's getting up there in years, and he was always more of like a good middle six or depth forward. And I think asking him to be 2C probably was a little bit much for this year. It worked last year, but this year it just hasn't really been the same. And I think, I saw some criticism for Perfetti and stuff in this game. And what I always think kind of gets missed is that Perfetti is a really good complementary player. And, I see him doing lots of really good work along the walls and stuff. Yes, the skating is kind of an issue, and it sometimes leads him to dump the puck off, in the offensive zone instead of carrying it in by himself. But I think one of the biggest reasons that he might not be looking that impressive is because he'll make a play, the puck gets to Vlad, and then Vlad kind of kills it. And I think that that's also happening to Ehlers. Ehlers hasn't really been the best version of himself at 5v5, and I think that there's a whole mismatch of three guys on this line who don't really fit together, but for some reason the coaching staff doesn't really seem that keen on changing it up. Once Lowry got up there, I thought they looked a little more at the races, but still, until they figure out the 2C thing and kind of split Ehlers from Perfetti, I just think that there's an incongruency with their skill sets, and it's causing some genuine issues when it comes to the 5v5 production. On the power play and stuff, I think if you had Ehlers and Perfetti there together, I don't know that you'd have the same issues, but when you're at even strength, it's a little bit of a different story. So something to keep an eye out for. I mean, the second line in general is just kind of all over the place this year, and I feel like it just doesn't really have a well-established chemistry. So hard to know what to do here. I do think the Lowry switch is the first good one, and I really do think that putting Connor and Perfetti together would actually be better in the long run. They are doing well as a top line right now with Scheifele, Velarde, and Connor. You'll hear me talk about this later and sort of what sort of quality we're getting out of them right now. But I feel like in order for the Jets to actually start controlling play, Connor and Perfetti just have really good chemistry, and I think you can maybe put Ehlers back up there on the first line, which will get him going, and Connor already is able to drive his own line. So if you put him with Perfetti and somebody else down the middle, I really feel like you're going to see a big improvement in the play. Just Ehlers and Perfetti really shouldn't be playing together. They haven't been that good together, and Vlad is only making things much worse. So weird situation, right? You have a couple of guys who are all individually skilled, and in particular with Ehlers and Perfetti, you know that they're top six guys, but they just don't play nicely together. So something to keep an eye on for the road ahead, and certainly I'm sure the Jets are trying to figure out how to make this trio work, because right now it's not been super ideal, even if at times the underlying numbers don't look so bad. But, we all can kind of watch some of the chemistry issues and stuff, and that there's probably a little more behind the scenes going on. So lots to sort of digest there. But, despite all of this, the Jets probably won't be happy with dropping a point. They really should have had an opportunity to win this game. They'll be upset about the dislodged net thing. I was more pissed off that they didn't whistle the Gibson one, because that to me was almost an intentional one. There was no reason for him to sort of, hit the side of the net and knock it off after the top line in OT started getting some real zone possession. So that to me should have been a penalty, but no use crying over spilled milk. The Jets have business to take care of tomorrow against the Detroit Red Wings, and I'll chat about what to expect from them in just a brief moment. Before we go too much further, though, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W, whether you're into figuring out who's going to score the next touchdown, which team is going to have more points, who's going to have the most rushing yards. It's a thrilling proposition. For me, the Ravens are playing Bailey Zapp tomorrow. I'm expecting a big Ravens win. I would think, Baltimore could probably get maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns. And, Derrick Henry probably going to rush for 100 plus yards because that's just Derrick Henry. But maybe they can rest the starters and we even get some backups. But the only way that you can even get in on the action is to visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are chatting a little bit about, some fun stuff for Winnipeg, maybe a disappointing result against the Anaheim Ducks, but Detroit is another opportunity for the Jets to come away with 2 points. A point against Anaheim in overtime, not the biggest deal, I guess. Again, I don't think the Jets are going to be thrilled with that, but, with the Red Wings, Winnipeg should be able to come away with a win. Detroit's not been great this season. They've been dropping lots of results. And, again, I did predict a win against Anaheim. I thought it was going to go better. Helly was a little bit mediocre by his own standards, which, I think he's more than earned a couple of off nights here and there. But again, you probably want to take care of business at home against weaker opponents. I mean, we see even Colorado, who were down 3-1 at one point against the Buffalo Sabres. They came all the way back to win 6-5. Was it pretty? No, but they still came away with a major result. So Detroit, you've got Veleno, Larkin, and Raymond on the first line. This trio has been pretty good lately. I think that's going to be a real danger trio. Larkin is somebody who could eventually be on the market as a trade option. And if that's the case, Winnipeg would honestly be really, I would say, intriguing as a destination for him. He's been a guy who's kind of been like a fringe 1C, maybe asked to do a little more and be that franchise player, and at times it's been too much for him, but I still think that he's a really good center, and for Winnipeg, if you're looking for a 2C option who might actually be your true 1C in quality, Larkin might be a guy whose two-way play and offensive smarts are really worth investigating. On the second line, you've got DeBrincat, Kopp, and Kane. Of course, Andrew Kopp, we all remember him being sort of the shadow 2C for Winnipeg a while back, but now he's actually playing 2C for Detroit, and that's probably not where they want him to be playing. But, given their center depth not being great, this is probably the best that they can do right now. DeBrincat, you all know how I feel about him. Very big fan of his. He's a menace, and, while this line doesn't have a lot of foot speed, DeBrincat himself is definitely a real danger player and somebody you don't want to give too much time and space to. Your third line is Berggren, Compher, and Tarasenko. You can kind of see where Detroit is maybe adding a lot of veteran wing skill and scoring talent without a lot of speed. Tarasenko had a brief run with Florida where he was looking pretty good, and the Red Wings' tenure has kind of been so-so. Kind of funny to see this guy who was once one of the most revered goal scorers on his third line, but that's kind of what happens as you age. So I look at this top line, and I feel like the Jets have a good opportunity to win these matchups. Didn't help yesterday, but I feel like Winnipeg will probably come out playing some pissed off hockey tomorrow. So let's hope for that. Fourth line, you've got Rasmussen, Kasper, and Mott. So again, I think Winnipeg does have an opportunity to come away with a big win. The Red Wings defense is not good. If I say the Jets defense is not good, Detroit's probably not much better. Sherratt, Seider as your first, Edvinsson, Petrie as your second, and Gustafsson and Hall as your third. It's a pretty thin unit. In my mind, whether it's at even strength or on the power play, Winnipeg should have a big advantage. In net, they've got Talbot and Lyon, and both Talbot and Lyon have actually been pretty solid this year. Talbot having a quietly pretty strong season. But, other than that, I mean, this Wings team, I think, to me, is just very average. There's not a lot going well for them this year. And when you look at their like 16, 18-4 record, it kind of feels like they sort of need to tear it down. The Iser plan's not really been going that well. They're dropping some not great games here and there. Past couple of games, they've been winning a little more. They beat the Caps in pretty impressive. But before that, they've lost to St. Louis, Toronto, Montreal, twice actually in a row. So it's hard to really get a read on what this Wings team is. But I would say I'm expecting them to be like a 500 team at best at the end of the season. Wouldn't shock me if they're under 500. I think that there's too much dead weight for them to get past. And I think Yzerman either thought that this rebuild was further along than it really is, or he overvalued the players that he brought in, because this team's roster quality is just, it's not great. And for Winnipeg, after a pretty decent game against Anaheim that didn't really end the way that they wanted, I would expect them to, come out playing with some determination. I would think, Winnipeg wins this one like 4-2 or 4-1. I know I called that scoreline yesterday and that did not go well, but I'll stick to my guns here. I think the Jets, maybe have one or two bad teams every year that seem to have their number. And like Anaheim, I feel like is maybe not as bad as some people think. They're not good. And I mean, there's a reason they only have like 15 or 16 wins on the season, including 2 against the Jets. But they've got some legit talent. Troy Terry is an amazing player. And I think you can kind of translate some of that same thought process with this Wings team, right? Detroit's a little deeper than Anaheim is right now. They're a little more defensively sound to a point, but they're still bad. And so I feel like Winnipeg will not be happy with anything less than 2 points. And in a way, like a overtime point's not really a big deal, but you're at home for like the next 9-10 games. You really want to come away with as many wins as possible, right? Pad that lead. You're still in first. You've still got things pretty well in hand. I think, the Golden Knights maybe have first place because of points percentage and stuff. But, for the Jets, this is a really good opportunity, again, to at least pad the Central Division lead, right? Like right now, nobody's really within touching distance of Winnipeg. Minnesota's kind of been struggling to win games lately. But, Winnipeg doesn't want to let off the gas either. Colorado is getting increasingly close. They're only 8 points behind now after a really rough start. And with them on like an unholy tear recently, they have, a legit shot to catch up to the Jets at some point and kind of fight for that first place. Not now, probably not in the next week or two, but Winnipeg probably wants to take as much of the advantage here as they can to come away with a couple of extra points to pad the lead. Winnipeg actually is technically in first right now. They are ahead by 1 point of Vegas, but the Knights do have 2 games in hand. So the President's Trophy race is going to be pretty tight. I know that that's not something that I think a lot of Jets fans care about. I mean, I would say that I think it's nice to have. Nicer to have is, playoff wins. That's probably my single biggest desire more than anything. Not losing and getting ousted in the first round would be kind of nice, but sometimes that feels like it's maybe asking for a lot. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. Let's just hope that the Jets, don't drop a result here. 2 points against Detroit would go, a long way to opening up this upcoming week. And Hellebuyck, having lost the opportunity to get his 300th win yesterday, if he does start on Saturday, would be nice to get him that victory on home ice. He'll get it at some point during the stretch, I would imagine, probably pretty early in, but, maybe they start Comrie, maybe they give Hellebuyck the night off. I feel like Connor kind of, calls his own shots in schedule, and if he wants to go, he'll probably go. And having had the Jets drop that result yesterday, I'm sure it probably sits a little bit, in the back of his head that he maybe passed up an opportunity to get that victory just a little bit sooner than he needed to. So hopefully, win 300 tomorrow. Big celebration at home. Would be nice for Helly to do it against his hometown NHL squad, if you can really call it that. But for the Jets, I guess I wouldn't be shocked if, maybe they drop a result here. They've been winning, a fair few games recently, and maybe times just slow down and maybe some weird stuff happens, but would really hope that they come away with 2 points. Now, one group that has been doing better as of late against, a mixture of opponents is the top line. But how fixed is the top line? We'll chat about that in just a brief moment. Before we go too much further, though, I did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subs you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. I've had plenty of sports subscriptions over the years, and sometimes you don't realize that you're getting the same service twice. And Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subs, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subs, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. If you're somebody who watches tons of TV and stuff online, this is a service that you really need to take advantage of. Rocket Money can help you figure out if you're paying for, maybe a couple of different sites. Maybe you've got 3 duplicates. We all know that there are tons of services with package deals where you can subscribe to 3 at a time. And, sometimes you even have an individual sub to one of those services simultaneously, and you don't even know it. Rocket Money can help you find those and cancel your unwanted subscriptions so you can reach your financial goals faster. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for joining us in tonight's closing thoughts as we're just wrapping up really quickly with some thoughts ahead of tomorrow's game against the Red Wings. So I said I do think the Jets will come away with a win. I'm really hoping they do. Wouldn't shock me if maybe something happens and maybe they'd somehow lose just because Winnipeg's kind of been getting back on track recently, and the season's long, exhaustion sometimes hits. And I feel like the Ducks game was it was good, but also missing some sort of spark. But hopefully, Winnipeg refines that spark against Detroit and gets Helly his 300th win. But the top line, I think, has been an interesting conversation point lately because they've been scoring a lot. In general, most of the underlying numbers look pretty solid for them. They're winning, actual goal share and expected goal share. They've generally been doing some globetrottery kind of stuff. And, the Jets are winning again. So I think the assumption is that they're doing really well. And I think that is mostly true. There's only one part of their game where I think that doesn't always hold. When it comes to the top line, one thing that's not really changed is some of the defensive issues, right? When they get pinned deep in their own end, that is where they tend to run into issues. When you're facing like a really fast countering team and you don't have either the forward grouping or the blue line pairing that can help them make, the puck transitions a little bit faster up the ice, it can pin them pretty deep. And the first line does have this still happen. I will say that Kyle Connor, for his part, has really tried to redouble his defensive efforts. He's still not good at it necessarily, but I feel like he's man-marking more. He's trying to chase down puck carriers. He's being more disruptive, which is awesome. That's always the only thing I ever asked of him, was just to be a little more consistent with it. We all know that you're, going to be a top forward, and maybe defensive stuff isn't really your thing, right? You're a top goal scorer. You're a great finisher. Sometimes you'll cheat for offense, but it's just nice to, see that he is really committed. He's fighting for the puck more often. And, I think he actually gets rewarded for it. His play in general has led to more scoring chances and stuff. And I think his game overall has really improved. That top line's performance probably is right now being driven by KFC's performance. I think his improvement has been dramatic enough to where he's driving transition, he's creating more offense. I feel like he's using his line mates better too, which is a really big change. In the past, he was always the trigger man, but this time he's become more of a dynamic playmaker, and that's really helped with Scheifele, who, he and Connor both have a really good understanding of where the other is on the ice. It's probably why Mark sometimes doesn't want to play with Ehlers. Nick is a little more unpredictable, and Ehlers is the one who's more often looking to find Scheifele in the slot or something, whereas with Connor, they tend to trade off roles, and, sometimes Scheifele will drift towards the slot and become the trigger man. Sometimes he's looking for Connor to one-time it from a face-off circle. And so there's sort of a distribution of roles and responsibilities. But, this top line is still not dominating. And I think that's a big thing where, in the playoffs, it does have a sizable impact. It's why the Avs continue to really give the Jets fits. You look at the bottom six or even the middle six and down for Colorado, and there's not a lot of high end skill, right? You move past Rantanen, McKinnon, Nichushkin at times, Makar. There's not a lot past there, but they're just fast. And because the Jets spend so much energy trying to slow down McKinnon and match that top line, it makes it very hard for the Jets themselves to actually catch up. They don't have an answer in the same way. Winnipeg is a team that wins by committee. I've said that a lot of times, and I think it's a very good strategy if your top line is getting maybe like 55% of the shot share, which is a lot, but that's what most other top lines are doing. Most of them are generally controlling play, and it just sets up waves of pressure for everyone else to sort of roll in and continue to crush the offensive zone. Winnipeg hasn't been able to do that this year. The top line is maybe more break even if they're winning, goal share. The second line has kind of been all over the place. The third line, at times can be really good, but they don't always score. And the fourth line is just a nice ground and pound sort of energy for checking unit, which they'll chip in some offense here and there. It's been a little less frequent than I'd want this year. 3 or 4 points for Kupari and guys like that. Maybe we're hoping for a bit more. Kupari's been using his speed well, and he's definitely improved, but the finishing and stuff like that hasn't exactly come along with it. So the Jets just need to figure out ways to squeeze out more offense, and it's why even if the top line is doing well, I still wonder about maybe changing up the line combos and trying to see if you can figure out a way to balance this top nine a little more evenly. Winnipeg doesn't have the luxury of doing it the way that a lot of other teams do. And so with that in mind, if you're not optimizing your lineup, it's going to be a lot harder to come away with consistent, big 5v5 wins. I think that a lot of pieces are in place for the Jets to do it. Less so right now with the injuries to the back end, but once everyone gets healthy and as the Jets start thinking about what they want to do with the trade deadline, could be a good opportunity to improve a couple of key positions for Winnipeg. Maybe the scoring wing depth could be a little bit better. Obviously, the center depth is a big concern. And the back end, the moment Sandberg went down, it all just kind of fell apart. And so, if the Jets can find another top 4 defender, that's asking a lot and probably a little bit above what the Jets are willing to spend. But maybe they go crazy this year. This would be a good opportunity to do so. Bringing in a big top 4 defender with at least some level of contract control would also help for the years ahead. We do have Helly and Scheifele locked up, so taking advantage of that while you still can would be great. You're going to have some extensions coming up pretty soon. Connor, Ehlers, Perfetti. It's going to get expensive soon. Velarde's expiring, I believe, after this year or so, which is, a big question mark, I guess. I think he'll probably get around $7.5 million per season. And I think the Jets would probably be pretty thrilled with that. 5-6 years of control at that price range would be very fair for a guy who's looking to pace around 70 points. So Winnipeg has a whole host of options, but the top line, while it is doing well, I just need to see them do it against Colorado and Vegas. Those are the two teams that always give the Jets fits. They seemingly face us every time in the first round. And if Winnipeg can't start putting up results against them, whether it's the top line or everyone else, they're not going to get far in the postseason. It's the painful truth, but every playoff route seems to go through one of those two cities at least once. And so hopefully if Winnipeg can either get through Denver or Vegas at some point and actually do it convincingly more than once, that'd be awesome. But, the playoffs can be a difficult animal, and the Jets still have lots of time before the trade deadline rolls around and for them to make some internal adjustments along the way. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But that is going to be all the time that we have for this episode. Let me know what you think about, the Jets' success against these two franchises. Do you think they'll find a way past Colorado or Vegas this year? Let me know in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter. Next week, we'll obviously have, recaps of Winnipeg versus Detroit and probably a preview ahead of a big game on Tuesday against Nashville. So hopefully the Jets come away with big points this weekend. Beating up on these weaker teams before you get into a very difficult portion of your schedule with Nashville, LA, Colorado, Vancouver, and Seattle. That's going to be one of the hearts of the schedule for this homestand, and Winnipeg really wants to get as many points as they can because that stretch right there, they might not win as many games as you'd hope. But give me your prediction for those series in the comments below or again at my social medias. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here Monday with more Jets coverage, so see you then. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.